Dan's note says that the water code says the Delta plan should prioritize levee improvements. Do you see it differently?
I think we have. I think we said we had the priority ought to be to move up to PL 8499, and in certain cases in the lowland levees, you ought to think of going a step further for seismic resistance. I'm sure Dr. Pike would probably want to.
So the difference isn't priorities, which I know Bob said could be done with current information and a dollop of common sense and a Ouija board. But so is the difference, Dan, here that this report calls for a prioritization? It's just that everything gets attended to rather than some do and some might not, and therefore potentially the cost would be higher for the state.
I guess I had envisioned, and you know, you're talking to somebody who's counting the sick leave, only been on the job for a couple of months, and someone talking with our staff, I think we had envisioned that we would end up between the state plan flood control priorities, look at the needs of the legacy communities, and the needs of the remaining islands in the Delta, an overall plan through the course of study that's currently outlined now in the current draft of the Delta plan, that would lay out a more detailed framework for upgrading levees. And it could be that we would see that with a reasonable expectation of revenues, we could get to a PL 8497. But we might find that wasn't feasible, that we were just, and that's my other concern. That they're really, that taking into account, you know, the financial situation and looking what could be accomplished in a reasonable period of time, that we would really see that we couldn't get to a PL 8499 standard for all islands. And in that case, the council might not want to be creating a false set of expectations about the level of improvement and the resulting state investment that folks could count upon.
So would the Delta plan preclude that?
Wouldn't necessarily. It doesn't have to, but I think it might set priorities. Here's where we believe state funds should first and foremost be invested.
So in the current draft of the plan, we say continue on with subventions and special projects, which right now are spending more money on Delta levees than ever in history, and are making, as you pointed out earlier, and our earlier presenters pointed out, are making significant improvements to levees. While we do, as Dan said, we do this really thorough analysis, and the legislation actually says we're supposed to confer with the State Board of Flood Control in order to do that prioritizing, and we think we need to gather more information. While maybe Dr. Pike and I could sit in a room and agree on something, I don't know that we could come out of that room and actually have that accepted by the majority of, or even a significant minority of the community. We need to go through a process with lots of facts and everybody seeing them, and integrate the state plan of flood control with a plan for the Delta with facts, and there are lots of facts, but they need to be updated, particularly with all of the work that's gone on and is going on in the Delta now. And we, at the end of that time, have a plan that says this is where we recommend the state invest its resources, and that's what we do, is make recommendations on the prioritization of funding. I do not think the council can or should say you can't upgrade your levees to PL 8499. I think that's bad public policy. If I were a landowner on an island that needed to spend just a little bit of money to get there, I'd be pushing my RD to get us up to that standard, and then probably go beyond it, because I'd want to protect my land. But part of this is about us making recommendations on the prioritizing of state funding moving ahead. And as Dan rightfully pointed out, we're talking about billions of dollars, and the state's funding predicaments make that difficult. The other thing that I'd point out is I think we support the proposal for a regional agency. That would help a lot because they could look at, well, here's what ought to be done, here's where the money can come from, and it wouldn't all be just dependent on the priorities that we recommend for state funding. It would also depend on what the local community wants to do.
So is the essential difference is that you would recommend state assistance for all levies and the Delta plan would not? Is that?
No. I think we're recommending that you can continue the programs that you have.
The levy subvention program.
Right, but we're not in disagreement of that.
Okay,
That's
then
consistent.
we've also said that there's existing funding available from the bonds that's been dedicated for levy work already that could very well, if applied to the Delta, could move up to that standard. I think you have to look at two things. One thing that SB 5 did, and the same thing that I believe it's with the Army Corps. You can start a project, they have a goal to get to. And you can start a project and work to that. And what we did with SB 5 was said, if you're not at 100-year flood protection, you want to get there as soon as that. You can. And when you get to that, you continue to work with 200. And as long as you did that, you got the ability to be able to exercise certain land use behind that. Okay, I'm not concerned about the land use, but the concept. If the Stewardship Council was sitting here saying, okay, what should be, without any consideration of the money, what would be the applicable standard you'd want to see the Delta levies at? And if it's X, then how would you allow people to work to that? Well, number one, you'd want to give the minimum of HMP. But are we saying, but by looking at an optimal standard, are we then saying that for the maximum, for the best value of protection, whether it be property, infrastructure, or people, we ought to be trying to achieve this standard? You know, levy work ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows with what bond money is available. It ebbs and flows with what the agricultural economy is doing. And it ebbs and flows with who happens to be participating. You take East Bay Mud; they're very conscious of the islands they go through, and they participate with the RDs. Burlington Northern Santa Fe does not participate in Jones Tract, though it has railroads going through that. So there's a lot of capture that could go out there to be able to get there. But should we be looking at saying, well, prioritize now, and we close the door, or is there an optimal standard that ought to be looked at to try to get to, though we know we may not have the resources to get to there immediately, and then you use a prioritization to use what resources are there?
Here would be my concern, is what happens with agencies that contract for state or federal water. They have a range of deliveries. When they get less than the maximum, they say that they were shorted. That's what tends to happen. So if you set a standard that can't be reasonably reached and exceeds what the state interests are or priorities are, then it will be constantly pursued as a commitment by the state. So I think as essentially a regional body, it's understandable why you would want all islands and all levees to benefit from state funding to upgrade levees. But as the Delta plan for the state of California, I think we have to apply some assessment of what's obtainable and what's necessary to meet state goals, which I think are going to be changeable as we update this, and if you're right that more money is available or there's a better reason to upgrade other levies, it's not
And I actually
prohibited
think,
in the
we
future.
can work with the commission on the language about current funds that are available, because I support that. The funds go away if they're not spent because of the way the Bond Act was written, and
Yeah.
that is what they were intended for.
And the other thing to think about, too, is there are some cases in the Delta where, the two immediate ones are McCormick-Williamson track, and then the other over at Dutch Slough, where both the landowners and the communities involved to decide, hey, the cost-effective thing and the proper thing to do is not to continue to maintain and upgrade these levees. No, the proper thing to do is to restore those lands, and they're generally people have viewed those as habitat restoration projects, but another way to look at them is as pilot projects and backing away from investments in levee systems and finding other approaches to dealing with those lands that are at flood risk.
The other thing that I just like to ask all of ourselves is part of this protect every levee on every island tied to the argument to not have a separate conveyance facility? And for those who want a pipe, do they want to pick and choose levees to make it less likely that you could have a armored through Delta conveyance system solely?
I think the converse is probably true too. People feel that if that happens, there's no interest to protect what you have, and the Delta is allowed to fail.
That might be the case for some people. It's not the case for me. As an engineer with some knowledge of the Delta Reform Act, it seems to me that to achieve the co-equal goals in the second sentence, you need to have a policy of making more robust levees independent of the solution to the conveyance problem. So it's true that, absolutely true that the status of the levees and the need to improve them gets mixed up in this other debate, but I don't think that's good. It's not necessary. The argument for improved levees stands on its own, regardless of solutions to conveyance. The arguments about cost are real, I know, but to put it in proportion.
But excuse me, but haven't you argued that a cost-effective levee rehabilitation program will obviate the need for a separate facility?
The economic sustainability plan, as
No,
I
no, I'm talking. I mean, am I wrong? Have you not made that connection?
I have not personally argued that.
Really?
No. I personally have a little difference with the implication that our joint effort has led to. I have no difference with the point that we got to, which is that a much improved levee system is a triple play in that it improves the Delta as a place, it improves the conveyance problem, and it's a basis for moving forward on ecosystem restoration. That's basically as far as the plan goes.
Okay.
If the plan is interpreted as saying this is the final solution for conveyance, then with due respect to my colleagues and my client, I would differ with that. I don't think it goes sufficiently far to solve the overall conveyance problem. But it's a big step.
Let me make a suggestion. Our DVD tape is about to expire. We have used up all that time. Our crew has asked us to take a 5-minute break while they change the equipment and start again. So if you do not mind, it's 11 after 5 according to the clock in the back. So at 16 minutes after 5, we're going to start again. Okay. Meeting in recess.